Welcome, everybody. Thanks for showing up to our webinar this week. I think they're close to weekly. We try to do them as frequently as we can, close to weekly. And we're really excited for this topic today. We're going to highlight something that has always been kind of a key centerpiece to the WhyTry approach. And we have, I think, some updated perspective on it. And it's a thing that I think is one of the biggest difference makers and maybe really the secret to motivation in general. So my name is Jason Johnson, and I welcome you all. I am going to kind of be the host and moderator, although we have three WhyTry representatives here today. And I think we all bring our own unique experience and perspective on this topic. So the webinar topic today is going to be on surrendering the one-up relationship, a powerful approach to connecting with every student. And let me go ahead and introduce our panelists, and then we'll get into this. So first of all, I will introduce Mr. Bruce Bushnell. Bruce Bushnell has centered his career around promoting youth success. He's an award-winning school counselor. Bruce was named the Counselor of the Year for the state of Utah and was also honored at the White House, receiving national recognition for his counseling interventions. Bruce has been a member of the Executive High School Relations Board, Senior Vice President of the Alpine Counseling Association, and Vice President of the Utah Counselor Association. Bruce now helps youth succeed by presenting passionate WhyTry keynotes and trainings across the country. As an advocate of the program from its earliest days, Bruce has also been a key contributor in developing many of the WhyTry learning activities, which are proven to help youth develop the social and emotional skills necessary to reach their goals. Welcome, Bruce. Thanks for joining us.
I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to it.
Next, we have Mr. Corey Anderson. And Corey has spent nearly 2 decades as an educator, beginning as a teacher and then as an administrator. He's been an assistant principal at a middle school and has served as a principal of 2 different elementary schools. Corey pioneered and started one of 2 public STEM programs in the state of Utah and helped consult with the State Office of Education on creating STEM standards for schools that would eventually be adopted by the STEM Action Center. Also, during his tenure as an elementary school principal, Corey oversaw behavioral units and led his school in implementing social and emotional programs and STEM activities, joined the WhyTry organization in 2019 as a trainer and director of curriculum development after using its social and emotional tools for close to 10 years in his administrative duties. Welcome, Corey.
Hi, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
We are happy to have you as well. And I am Jason Johnson. My background is I am a school psychologist. I came over from public ed to the world of WhyTry about 6 years ago. I oversee training, research, and development. I don't know, wear a bunch of different hats. And my one of my favorite things that I get to do is kind of moderate on these webinars and be with our incredible panelists that we have. So today we're going to take a little bit more personal approach. We're going to dig into something that has, I think, real universal application, but we have our organization, the WhyTry organization, which most of you hopefully know by now. We are an SEL organization. We have an SEL toolkit and a resilience toolkit. And we're going to dig into one of the pieces that's really specific to us. I think it's kind of the heartbeat of our whole approach, and really excited to share it with you. And for those of you that may be familiar with this element of our material, I'm excited. I think Corey's going to talk about kind of a really updated approach to it that we're really thrilled to be able to share with you. So with that, I want to jump right into it. We're gonna talk about this concept of surrendering the one-up relationship as this powerful approach to connecting with every student. Now, before we do that, let me just kind of outline we'll approach this. So I'm going to go first, and I will kind of give my relationship to this topic and kind of how it impacted me at a professional level as a school psych. And then I'll give kind of a base definition that serves as the kind of the foundation for where Bruce will go next. Then I'm going to throw to Bruce, and Bruce is going to share some specific strategies from his extensive experience and kind of how they connect directly to our model. Then Bruce is going to throw to Corey, and Corey is going to give kind of our most updated view of it, as well as tell you about a pretty exciting new model that we have in conjunction with this. And so with that, let me just jump right into it. So this concept that we're going to talk about today, it's called surrendering the one-up relationship. And it's very specific to really the most critical piece to our whole approach. Now, I think one thing that educators universally agree upon is the power of relationships and the importance of relationships. I've yet to find an educator that disagrees with me on that. Where I think we really can get better consistency around them and leverage them in a better way is if we learn to talk about them in a really kind of specific, useful way, in a way that can directly impact our kiddos. And then if we can learn to be really, really intentional with them. And whenever I train groups of people on the WhyTry model, I always encourage them to please be as intentional with your relationship building strategies as you are with your academic lesson plans in general. I really do think it's that important. So let me start the process by just throwing a question out to you. And if you don't mind, I want everybody, first of all, just take a quick look at your chat tool and make sure that you've adjusted it so you're sharing your comments with everyone. That will help the chat feel like a nice group discussion. Here's here's what I want you to respond to. For this first one, I want you to respond by raising your virtual hand if you've ever had this experience. Have you ever had the experience of having a student that would work for you when they wouldn't work for the other grown-ups in the building? Raise your virtual hand if you've ever had that experience. I am just keeping track, and I think that has been a universal experience. Okay, so here's my question for you. If you raised your hand that you have had that experience, then what I want you to do is type into the chat and tell me, what was your secret? How did you get a kid to work for you when they wouldn't work for the other grown-ups in the building? Share it in the chat. This is really one of the most important things for us to contemplate, I think, in education. So we've got them coming in. Connection. The kid trusted me. Connection. I showed that I cared. I had to make a connection. Yes, exactly. It always comes back to some aspect of the relationship. And it typically is a reflection of how the kids feel when they're around us. So the WhyTry approach to relationships is built around this concept that we call surrendering the one-up relationship. And I'm going to suggest to you that the existence of this concept of the one-up relationship is one of the biggest hurdles that we have to overcome. And I love all the ideas that you just shared. That list alone is so valuable, like to pick apart and dissect and really say, okay, now how can we apply this universally? So I have a model that I want to present to you that I think can help give language to a lot of that. So I'm going to go right to our toolkit, our online toolkit, and I'm going to show you what our approach to that is. So our approach is to follow this model we call surrendering the one-up relationship. And I'm going to go through and read our definition of that. And then I'll tell you kind of my personal experience of how I learned about this. When I learned about the one-up relationship, it changed my whole trajectory as a school psychologist. So first of all, let's define it. So surrendering the one-up relationship, as you can see, is a set of specific strategies that help educators build authentic, unconditional relationships that help all students feel understood, valued, and safe. When done effectively, surrendering the one-up relationship is the X factor for motivating all students to action and seeing their potential. So that's what we're describing. When you hear us use that phrase, surrendering the one-up, it's actually very specific to our approach to interacting with kids in a way that will hopefully be motivating to them. So here's our kind of expanded definition of this. Surrendering the one-up relationship is the key to motivating the difficult to reach student. It involves the following: consistently and unconditionally communicating to the student that they have value and worth regardless of their successes, failures, or behaviors, creating greater equity in the relationship between the educator and the student, and acknowledging the student as the expert in their own lives. The key to creating change doesn't lie in interventions alone, but much more so in the relationship you establish with students. And one major barrier to facilitating a motivational and supportive relationship with students is the presence of a one-up relationship. Moving on, what is the one-up relationship? You may have observed in your own conversations and relationships that one person is often one-up or the other on the other, or predominantly in control. For example, have you ever had a conversation with a teacher, a mentor, or someone who is an expert at a subject that you're just beginning to learn? When you discuss that subject, you feel that they have the advantage because of their expertise and knowledge, whereas you are just beginning to learn the basics. They're one up on you and are often in control of the conversation. Students often find themselves one down in relationships with adults who have control in their lives. Often when a student sees an adult as one up or in control of the relationship, then they feel unimportant, or that what they want or think doesn't matter. Students feel that their ability to act for themselves is taken away. As a result, they have little motivation to make a change and are less likely to establish a trusting relationship with that person. When you as a counselor, teacher, or therapist surrender the one-up relationship, you are showing to students that they have value and worth as human beings. You show them that what they think is important. Your focus is less about your role as the authority figure and more about your students. You help them to see that they are the authority on themselves. You let them know that you believe in them and their potential. So this one-up relationship, I didn't really understand it when I first got into education. And as a school psych, I was working a lot in the special education classroom. And when I started meeting with kids, after I could get them to open up to me, they would often express how they felt. They would use language around some version of one down, but they would often express how they felt one down in a lot of the relationships that they had at school. And it really started to kind of formulate in my mind this understanding of how the dynamics of the relationships that were there can really impact us for good or for bad as we try to motivate and work with these kiddos. Now, a couple of words that I want to clarify, and then I'll kind of give you my own personal story of how I really learned about this. First of all, the one-up relationship. So we define the one-up relationship as any relationship or situation in which the student feels they have less value or importance than the other person, or perceive they have less value in the eyes of that adult compared to other students. Often as educators, our title or position can communicate an imbalance of value in the relationship, despite how we may actually feel about the student. So that's the one-up relationship, first of all, to make sure we're on the same page there. The other word I want to clarify is the word surrender. Surrendering does not mean eliminating rules, boundaries, expectations, or accountability. It does mean to surrender a part of our will in favor of giving students voice and choice and being vulnerable with students and making their well-being our focus. So Bruce is going to talk in a minute a little bit more about some specific strategies, but I want to talk first about this concept of the one-up relationship. So when I finished grad school, I was the first person in my family to do grad school. I was really proud of what I had done. And so I had kind of a dumb idea that I ended up doing. And the dumb idea, I was like, I need to reward myself. I'm now a school psychologist. And in my mind, the way that I decided I wanted to reward myself was to go out and get a proper school psychologist chair. So I went and got this fancy leather school psychologist chair. I walked into the office furniture store and this chair was like calling my name, buy the chair, buy the chair, buy the chair. Went, turned the tag over, it said $650, started to walk away. And then there was this voice in my head that was like, no, you deserve this. You finished grad school, buy the dang chair. So I went back, bought the chair. It was probably a financially irresponsible decision. And then I went to work. I got my first assignment as a school psych. And my first assignment was at a junior high. And long story short, the junior high that I was at, it was an older school. It hadn't been updated in a while. It was an overcrowded school. And my first office that they assigned me as a school psych was a converted utility closet. So when I rolled into my first assignment, I had my fancy chair and I had this box full of books from grad school to prove how smart I was. The principal told me what office I was in, office 27. I go down to the end of the hall, take a left, and I see office 27 and it says utility closet. And my heart just drops and I realize, oh, wow, welcome to public ed. I had to clean it up. It was full of old desks and chairs that still had use, but they hadn't been thrown out because we tend to hoard things a little bit in education. I knew I wanted to run groups, so I kept the 6 best of the worst chairs that I had in there. They were beat up metal chairs with swear words carved in them. And then I had a beat up old desk. There was a sink on the floor in the corner that I could wring a mop out in because it was a utility closet. And then in the middle of all of this was my glowing, fancy psych chair. And I started my life, my career as a school psych. And I learned this really tough reality that connects to the one-up relationship early on. And the tough reality that I learned was middle school kids weren't very excited when they got called down to meet with the school psychologist. So I had the intention in my heart was massive. I wanted so badly to help and to save all these kids. And I started meeting with them in one-on-one settings. And very early on, I became really discouraged because I realized these kids had already made up their mind about me before I ever even started to engage with them in any capacity. They weren't trying hard for me on the assessment tests that I was doing. It was throwing numbers off. It was making my life as a school psych really difficult. And I just wasn't connecting well with these kiddos. And it got to the point that I was getting very, very discouraged and even having like thoughts of, have I made a professional error? Should I have pursued a different career? What's going on here? And that really started to worry me. And so it was like a very specific day, about 3 months into my life as a school psych, where I really learned about this idea of the one-up relationship, and it changed my whole trajectory. And so by the time I crossed paths with the world of WhyTry and realized that there was this whole model that lined up with this thing that I had figured out, I was so thrilled to realize kind of our common ground. So here was the moment, the specific moment. So as I mentioned, I had kids, they weren't connecting well with me. They weren't trying hard on their tests. It was throwing numbers off. So one day I came in and I was looking at my plan for the day. And I had the name of this kid that I was supposed to administer a psychological and academic assessment on. So before I tested him, the principal comes down to my office and he goes, "Hey, Jason, just a heads up, the kid you're about to test was the most difficult student in our school last year." And I'm thinking, oh, great, I'm already not doing good at this. Now I've got to test the toughest kid in the school. So out of desperation, I did like just a kind of an experiment at the last minute, and it changed everything and opened my eyes to this one-up relationship. So here's what I did. I set up my test kit. I got the most dented up, banged up chair that I could and put it side by side with my fancy leather chair. And I set them right in front of the desk I was going to do the assessment at. I invite this kid down to my office, say, "Come on down," meet him at the door. And the experiment that I did was fairly simple. I just didn't tell him what chair to sit in. I said, "Go ahead and have a seat and let's get started on the test." I motioned over. So you've got beat up metal, fancy leather chairs sitting next to each other. Take a guess what chair this kid automatically went to. Instinctively, what chair do you think he went to? Beat up metal or fancy leather? Without being given any instruction. We've got guesses on both sides. If you guessed the beat up metal chair, you're exactly right. He went straight for the beat up metal chair. And that opened my eyes a little bit. It was kind of like this aha moment. Okay, there's a reason he's going to the beat up metal chair. So he starts to sit down right before his butt hits the ground. I go, whoa, 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 what are you doing? He goes, I'm getting ready to take your test, Mr. Johnson. I go, not in that chair, you're not. He looks at me kind of suspicious. I go, no, you're a guest in my office. You're the most important person in here. Get your butt in the good chair. He slides over to my fancy leather chair, plops down, and he does a full spin. Comes around and our eyes lock. And I go, it's a pretty nice chair, isn't it? He goes, yeah. I go, it should be. That's a $650 chair. He goes, really? I go, yeah, really. And he goes to work. And here was the craziest part. 10 minutes into this test, I vividly remember this. He looks up at me and he goes, you can have your chair back now, Mr. Johnson. And that was my full aha moment. That was where it all came together. And I realized part of my struggle with connecting with kids was because they already felt a certain way within the system before they ever even came into my office and met me. He went to the beat up metal chair because he knew that's who he was in the relationship before he had any previous history with me. He knew I was the fancy leather chair because I had a title and I was the grown up, and he knew he was the beat up metal chair. Even to the point that after I moved him to the fancy leather chair, 10 minutes in, he still said, no, you can have this back, because he didn't believe it. So at that point, I made eye contact with him and I said, I already told you, but I need you to understand, you're the most important person in here. That's the chair for you. And in fact, here's my commitment to you. Anytime you and I have to meet, regardless of the circumstance, you're going to sit in this chair because this is who you are to me. He gets a little smirk on his face and he goes to work. And it was the craziest thing. It felt like he was trying harder on the test for me than any of the previous kids that I'd worked with. And this was allegedly the most difficult kid in the school. So he became my official first experience of having a kid that would work for me when he wouldn't work for other grownups. 2 weeks later, when he climbed on his math teacher's desk and dumped her garbage can out and was screaming the F word in her face, she called me because I was the only grown-up in the school that could get him to respond. So what changed? There was no magic in the chair, but what did that simple thing do and change in our relationship for he and him? Where I couldn't connect with kids effectively before, now I had this very difficult student and I did that small act and it changed how he responded to me. What was it that changed? Any ideas? You can respond in the chat. I don't mind blowing up the chat. So one, I gave him respect. And then there you go, Sylvia. He felt different around me. In that moment, he felt valued, he felt seen, he felt different. So I started doing that every time. And 9 out of 10 times, the same thing would unfold. And it was like a miracle happened. All of a sudden, it felt like kids were trying harder for me on their tests. It felt like kids were responding to me different. And my whole relationship to my job changed. But I had to acknowledge and recognize that there was this hurdle of the one-up relationship. Kids already had decided how they felt within the system before I ever even had a chance to connect with them. And so I had to figure out a way to get over that one-up relationship before I could start to do my job, do what I was tasked to do as the school psychologist. It changed everything. So I present that, I share that, and I appreciate you letting me share my personal story, but I share that as the foundation for where we want to go now. The WhyTry approach is centered around this relationship-based concept called surrendering the one-up relationship that acknowledges that one-up relationship and then focuses very intentionally on specific strategies to allow us to overcome that hurdle and to connect in a very real way. So I'm going to throw over to Bruce now and let Bruce talk specifically about strategies and go ahead and take it away from here, Bruce.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Love that story. That's a great story. And I appreciate everybody that's listening in today. I saw some good comments of things that you're doing. I'm sure our audience that's coming in do a lot of things that fall into our category of surrendering the one up. And we have approximately 60, up to close to 60 strategies. And we kind of put them in a kind of a category. And our strategies are, there's sometimes they're strategies, sometimes they're activities. and the combination of both. But there's strategies that help us create student connection. That's what, that's part of Surrendering the One Up. Strategies that facilitate student empowerment, where, we help motivate and help the student move forward and do positive things in their life for the positive motivation, and strategies that are definitely student-centered. And some of them cross over boundaries. I would like to share a couple strategies in each one of those. And again, what Jason mentioned, I think is really important. I think a lot of you put it in your chat window, why they responded to you and not someone else, but they feel valued, understood, listened to and understood, and safe. They trust you. And so anything you do to do that, and I always felt I was pretty good at establishing a relationship with students, but once I understood Surrendering the One Up, I realized I missed some things. And it allowed me and helped me to become better and stronger and enhance what I was doing. And it changed me as an educator. So the very first question I always ask when I'm starting with any group, I was a counselor and a teacher, but have I or have we surrendered the one up to the group, to the class, or to that individual student? And that's exactly what Jason did in his story. So I'm going to go to share and just share a couple things. Okay, I hope everybody can see that. And of course, I'm going to share, 3 or 4 or 5 strategies. And some of you are maybe familiar with these, but we have, there's a variety, and I've done most of them and used them anyway. And it's really helped me to send that clear message that I do believe in students and care about them. And so one that I have story after story, and I'll share one example, is as one of the strategies is to allow students to have their voice and do a passion presentation of what they love or care about. And that helps them to feel understood. And I love them. I had a partner, a counselor, that worked with us at Pleasant Grove in my high school, and his name's Kevin Card. And Kevin Card, we would always, as a teacher, facilitator, educator, share something we love or care about. And then we would have students in our class sign up to do passion or interest, hobbies, something they really care about, where their heart is, presentation for 5-7 minutes. But we had some of the biggest breakthroughs with students when first we demonstrated what we loved, but then we listened to them and connected with them on what they loved. This kind of falls under the category of student-centered. We're focusing on their interests, their hobbies. And so if you look here on this particular slide, Kevin Carter is the one with the white hat, and his passion is to grow big tongue pumpkins. He's grown over a 700-pound pumpkin, and he's passionate and excited about it, has a lot of enthusiasm for it. If you look on the left, down in the left-hand corner where he's built a little hut or lean-to over his pumpkin, he builds kind of a little house for them. He pipes music into them. He talks to them. I tell my wife, if she'll treat me as good as Kevin treats his pumpkins, I'll die one happy man. And so, he'll, to demonstrate his passion, he'll have a slide presentation. I just have a few of his slides. He'll put on a song, the Monster Mash, and then he'll go through the slide presentation. And then he holds contests at a place called Thanksgiving Point. He's the judge. He's the one that runs it, sets it up. And so he'll show them how you carve a pumpkin, a pumpkin not carved, a huge pumpkin, and what it looks like after. He has, he runs these competitions and has champions. They win prizes, and kids and families really get into it, and they love it. And then he again shows additional. He has a series of slides, but one of the greatest things at the very end of his presentation on his passion is that he has a little envelope that has a female and male pumpkin seed. And on the back, it tells you a website where you can go and learn how to take care of plant seeds and nourish them and take care of them to grow a big pumpkin. And then it has their pedigree or their genealogy. You'll say this has a name for the pumpkin, and it's a female seed and a male seed. And don't ask me how that works, but it's all I know is when I did it and planted the pumpkin seeds in my backyard, it broke my wheelbarrow. I had a very cheap wheelbarrow, but it collapsed because I had a huge pumpkin. But that connects him to those students. And then in that class, we had the students sign up to do their passion presentations, what they're interested in. Just give you one example. And I think I'd really recommend to you that's something, if you, some of you probably have done something similar, but if you will make a commitment to that, you will have a great return on how it's a great strategy for strengthening the one up. My one example today is that we had a young man in his passion presentation presented hockey. He was on a hockey club team. He skated in one of the rinks we have in our area where we had the Olympics, and he was the goalie. And so he brought in his hockey uniform and a picture of him in a game, and talked about why and his hockey stick, and talked about why he loved hockey. But all his peers listened. But from that, I connected with him. When he'd come into the class, I had something in common. I'd ask him about his hockey team. How does his game go? And how things were going for him. He had lost his dad, and I think he really was looking for a male role model. And we made a strong connection. And I called his mom without him knowing and found out when his next hockey game was. And I took my son Pete, he was about 12 years old at that time, to the hockey game. And this young man's name was Eric, and he skated over at the end of the game. He waved to me at the first, knew I was there. At the end of the game, he had a great game. His team won, and he was the goalie. He skated over to the wall and said, "Mr. B," they called me Coach B or Mr. B, "what are you doing here? Are you here to watch? Do you have a family member or someone you know?" I said, "No, I don't have a family member. I do have someone I know." And he said, "Well, who is it?" And I said, "Eric, it's you." And you should have seen his face. It lit up. When I said I came to watch him, from that time forward, we had an unbelievable relationship. But it came from even just listening or connecting. I didn't have to go to the hockey game, but that took it to the next level. And so I really recommend passion presentations. Jason already mentioned it, but you want to be intentional. And many times in our lesson plans, when we're doing an activity or a lesson, we plan, what is our strategy that we're going to use to surrender the one up? Have we, or how can we? And then we'd review after, did we? And it's got to, again, when you surrender the one up relationship and do a strategy, it's got to be genuine. It's got to be sincere, authentic. So students will focus on they'll get that message, and they know it's coming from you because you really do care. Another one in kind of center connection, where I won't have a slide, but it's one that maybe you do, but you can put some real effort into and brainstorm it, is celebrating success. And you could celebrate success in so many ways. And sometimes I've made a cake. If you accomplish this goal as a class or group, or have a pizza party. When we were trying to have them fill out our WhyTry journals at the end of the year, they had to do at least 90% of the journal. Those that made it got this pizza party, but we celebrated that with the pizza party. You can have one time we had a competition. That's another strategy, where we did service to raise things for a service project, and it was each class against each class. And in my class, I said, if we are the winning class, getting them to pull together, I will shave my head or shave my legs. And my wife made me say shave my legs because she didn't want me to shave my hair. And so when they actually they accomplished it, they pulled together, and we connected. Students connected with students, and students connected with me. They won the competition, and the hair is still not grown back on my legs since my legs was shaved. And anyway, that's a long story, and I'm not showing my legs today, but it's there's no hair on my legs from that one example of celebrating success. You can use music as a reward to celebrate success. Hey, we can listen to your favorite song. You can do a group yell. I'm a coach. A lot of times when we have success in a class or group, I have them put their hands together, and we do a team yell or team and raise our hands. And I'll tell them team stands for together, everyone achieves more. I have these golden stickers. I just put them on their paper just when I saw something great. And they knew that it was the golden seal, so to speak. Just a positive comment, or privately pulled someone off and say, hey, I've noticed you've really been working hard on improving. You're becoming one of our best leaders. There's a lot of things you can do in that strategy, but you got to be intentional. And so it becomes part of what you're looking for and doing with students. And so that's kind of, those are two. Again, we have approximately 60. And then I'd like to go to what we call, this one is the student connection. That was more student centered, those two. And this is one of my favorite strategies. And I've done this many times. We call it dress it up. And you can dress them maybe on a particular holiday in a certain outfit or a uniform or whatever that you want to dress in. But on this particular one, it's dressing up in a suit or, in more formal dress. And it's a way of sending a powerful message to your students. And it's, again, it's kind of an empowerment. I mean, it's a connection that they'll always remember. And so the very first time we did this, I was teaching WhyTry with an English teacher. They called her Mrs. P, and they called me Mr. B. And we both walk into the class, and I'm wearing a tuxedo, and she's wearing a formal dress. Our students, what do they want to know immediately? Why you dressed up? And they had we built a lot of curiosity. One lady said, "Are you going to a funeral?" I said, "No, I usually don't put a tux on to go to a funeral." And then another person said, "Are you going to a wedding?" That's maybe a possibility, but they were really curious. And then after we kind of built that curiosity, Paige and I went out of the room, Mrs. P and I went out of the room, and we each of us had a silver tray with mini chocolate eclairs. And we went around and gave each student a mini chocolate eclair. And then whoever's turn it was, who's going to be the spokesman, this very first time it was my turn, we came to the front of the class, and you could have heard a pin drop. We had the attention, and we said basically this message: we dressed up today for you. We dressed up today because you're important to us. We dressed up today because we truly care about you. We dressed up today because we believe in you. We dressed up today for you. And those students, when we taught our lesson, they were so into the lesson. But we set the frame kind of like Jason's story. Those students responded, and they knew that we believed in them and cared about them and received that message and strengthening everyone up. And they were, in a sense, empowered, and they put more effort and motivation in things we were asking to do in the class. And so, and then another strategy with student connection is one we did. I don't have the actual card, but I have my business card, and you probably can't see it. But we call the strategy, give them your business card. You may not have a business card, but I was a counselor, and we made up counseling cards, kind of like a business card, and it would give them to individual students. And that individual student would receive it, would say, "Hey, I want you to have my business card or my counseling card. You're my boss. I work for you. And I want you to be able to contact me. I'm here to support you anytime you need me." And so they would receive that like it was something really special. We made it special. And on the front with the business card, besides their name and how they could contact us, we had a quote. And it was an inspiring quote. Then on the flip side of the card, we had steps for how to manage and reduce stress in your life. We felt like a lot of our students were struggling with handling a lot of the pressures and expectations they had. And so giving them that sent a powerful message. And it's funny, I saw students all around the city would come up, say, and they put their card, the business card, in their wallet or purse and held on to it because it had meaning to them. So that's another one, was dress it up. And I'm going to go off share for a second, just do these last two, and then I'll turn it over to Corey. The last two are more on student empowerment, and I'll just do them very briefly because I want to make sure we have time for Corey. But one of my favorite ones, when we had a class or a group, and a lot of these definitely can be done individually, but was called "You've Got the Blues." And it was a way to try to let students know we were trying to understand and also to empower them to be the best they could be. And "You Got the Blues" was, we made we made cards that were blue, but they were cards that would give to the students. We laminated them, gave it to them, that they could cash in anytime. It could be cashed in. We say, we know life is tough, There's a lot of challenges. Sometimes you're going through a lot, you're suffering and going through some, things that are difficult in your life, setbacks, trauma, whatever that word is, adversity, challenges. And we trust you to use these cards wisely, but the cards would be that you could cash a card in to drop a quiz. You could cash a card in to retake a test. And you could cash a card in to have an extension on a research paper or a project, an extra 4 or 5 days or a week. And we trust you, you'll know when to use that, but we know we want to be empathetic to all the things that are going on to your life. It was an amazing message. And I would never tell a teacher what they need to do on their cards. That's just what we did. So if we leave that up to, but it's a strategy that we've got probably so many things that came back, that from students and a lot of them would hold on to those cards like a security bank blanket, and they would, they wouldn't even cash them in. They just, because they felt like they might need them and really at some time they didn't want to let go of them, but the kids did turn them in. But it sent a message. They knew that we understood and that we were trying to understand, to be empathetic to their lives and what was going on in their lives, sending that message of, again, surrendering the one-up relationship. And the last one, just really brief, says, you make the grade. Yeah, or you give the grade. And would allow students to grade on some projects or assignments, grade what they did, give them a little bit of the criteria. We found students would grade even harder than we would grade, but it was giving them that autonomy to, hey, they can grade themselves. And I took it a little further than that. At the end of each term, I let them grade me and give me a grade. And I have to be honest, I was nervous the first time I did that. I thought, this is not going to be good. Why did I do this? But letting them give me a grade, because I give them a grade for what they're doing, it sent a message that we're equal. It kind of brought equity and empowered them, that we trusted them to make that choice. And so I allowed them to grade me. Anyway, there's so many. I'm passionate about it because I've seen the difference, and I've seen it change students' lives. And truly, everyone's listening today, we are the lifelines to our students. And through focusing on surrendering the one up, these strategies, we can truly change the climate and culture and change an individual student's life. So I'm going to turn it now over to Corey, and I think I'm off share, so I think you can go right on.
Awesome. So, hey, Jason and Bruce did a great job giving actual stories and practical, some ideas of how to surrender the one up. I really like surrendering the one up because, to me, we talk a lot about in education about building relationships, but we rarely talk about how to do it. We just assume that people know how to build relationships. And I don't think that's the case. I think we do need to be intentional, like both Jason and Bruce said, and have lots of ideas and different ways that we can intentionally do it. When you surrender the one up, as we've really looked at what this means, we've learned some things along the way. And I'm going to share a screen with you. Hopefully, can you guys see that okay, Jason? Can you confirm? Can you see my shifts in mindset? Yes?
Yeah, yep, you're good. It's
okay,
right there.
Good. So, these are some shifts as you learn to surrender the one up to better kind of help you understand what's really taking place here. It's really starting to look at building relationships in a new way. You're learning when you surrender the one up, some of the shifts in your mindset towards relationship building are listed here. You go from seeing the potential in every student to helping every student see and feel their own potential. You go from using your authority to maintain control to sharing power and authority to create equitable relationships. From building compliance through relationships to building community through relationships. From evaluating your effectiveness based on some positive relationships to evaluating your individual relationship with all students. From viewing relationship building as a two-way street to taking on the responsibility, that intentionality of developing the relationship. From helping every student feel valued to helping every student feel valued regardless of their success, failure, or behavior. From telling students how they should feel about their lives, experience, and emotions to acknowledging students as the expert on themselves. From being guarded with students to being vulnerable. From telling students how things will run to collaborating with students on how things will run. From using consequences to motivate to leveraging your relationship to motivate. From prioritizing academic goals and objectives to prioritizing students' overall well-being. These things are very powerful. And speaking from speaking from an administrative point of view, one of the things that we constantly hear in our training when we do a mini workshop on surrendering the one up, when we're training on, one of our curriculums like WhyTry or Resilience for Youth, we constantly hear educators say, oh man, my organization needs to hear this. Like, I agree with this 100%. If everybody I worked with felt this way, things would be amazing. And we've really thought about that a lot because we frequently hear about that. And so we've recently developed a package that we have come up with that we feel is pretty powerful about surrendering the one up. And the package that we've developed is what we call oh geez, I already forgot it. It's a staff development and administrative toolkit, because in reality, getting an entire organization to learn the importance of surrendering the one up and understanding those shifts in mindset, that is a whole initiative. And trying to make a cultural change in your organization, it's not an easy thing to do. In fact, I want to quickly play a video that kind of illustrates the point I'm trying to make. Let me hurry and do this share. Let's see, there I am. We're going to watch this video really quickly. It kind of paints the picture here of what I'm talking about. Go ahead and watch this. And as you watch this, think in your head, what had to happen to make this a success? No, there's the sound. Okay. Pretty crazy, right? So as you look at something like that, you can probably hear him celebrating. Pretty cool, right? Well, so here's the thing. Initiating something in a school in many ways is like that, right? Like, there's a lot of things that come into play. You have to have the right trajectory. There has to be a lot of thought that goes into it. And you can't just say, hey, we're all going to learn how to surrender the one up and do it. And so what we've done is we've developed a package. Let me do a new screen share, where we will come in and we actually provide a training where we do an initial training on surrendering the one up with an organization. And it's 2.5 hours long. And in that initial training, we go over everything that we just talked about in this short hour, but much more in depth. We have a metaphor. We use videos to show effective examples, and even the video that's a non-example. And we just do a really good job of teaching all about surrendering the one up. And then after that, we actually meet with leadership teams, because we know in order for an organization to make a lasting change, not only do you need to learn about it, but then, there has to be a team behind it that's leading it. And so then we will meet with the leadership team and help them put together a plan for implementing that over the course of a year or whatever time length they want to do. And then what we've done is we've actually created workshops that team will use in order to continue to delve deeper into what it means to surrender the one up. These are the titles of actually 6 of our workshops that we have put together. And we give these workshop plans to the leadership team or the administrator or the principal, so that over the course of the year, they can teach all about surrendering the one up through some additional training. We have one called Digging Deeper, more strategies for surrendering the one up. We have a trauma-informed workshop, a trauma-informed continued, because a lot of times students that we have the most difficult time reaching are those who are dealing with trauma, because there's a lot of trust issues there. We talk about how self-awareness can affect our ability to surrender the one up, and we even have a workshop all about celebrating success. And we even have some additional resources that provide additional videos and quotes and things that leadership team can use to really push this idea of building relationships in your organization. So on top of just this principle of surrendering the one up and the strategies and examples that Jason and Bruce gave to you, if you feel like this is something your organization could really use, this is something you may be interested in. This package is something that you can team up with your administrator, or if you are a part of the leadership team, it may be something that you will want to investigate and say, you know, we may want our whole organization to look at this, because I promise you that culturally speaking, right, if you want to affect your school climate or your school culture, there is not a more significant way than you can do it than to help your entire staff or colleagues intentionally look at building relationships. And we believe that this can go a long ways to helping you do that. And so as a part of this, I hope that resonates with you. A lot of times the people who attend our webinars, you know, they get this principle of building relationships and how important it is to do it unconditionally. And as I looked at your comments in the chat window, I can tell you feel that way. If you feel this is something your organization could definitely use, if you are not necessarily in a position where you're an administrator or on the leadership team, you may consider approaching them and saying, hey, you should check this out. This may be helpful for our school or for our organization. And you can reach out to us and learn all about it and invite your administrator to join that. In fact, do we have a slide for that, Jason, by chance? Do you know? I should have asked that beforehand. I was probably in charge of creating that slide.
Corey, which slide are you asking about?
Just a slide that invites them to reach out to us. Do we have something with our contact information?
Yeah, I'll loop some slides, including a QR code that has our contact information, as well as it'll say schedule a demo. That's probably the easiest link to follow. Here, let me
awesome. So Jason's going to get that slide up here in just a moment. This is our call to you. Great strategies from Jason and Bruce. Put them into practice this year. Your kids are going to need it. You'll love your job even more as you intentionally build relationships and focus on surrendering the one up. And if you think this is something that your organization needs as a whole, then take a look at this QR code. Write down that whytry.org/schedule a demo, and you can meet with somebody from our organization, one of our program directors. I think even Mark Merrill, he put a link there in the chat window. He's one of our program directors. You would meet with one of them. You can bring in your leadership team, other colleagues, your principal, just to hear all about it and what it's all up and what we do and what we can provide to help your organization make that cultural shift, that climate shift in how they view relationship building. And that's what we have for you. Hopefully that resonates. I enjoyed sharing that with you. Great job, Jason and Bruce. Great information. We have a few extra minutes if there's question and answer, or if Bruce or Jason have anything in addition they want to share.
I would just say, you've already kind of said it, Corey, but with all what we've gone through with the pandemic and the things that we've been dealing with across the country and the world, you know, we have a lot of kids that have been, in a sense, traumatized, and probably the greatest thing is that human connection and establishing relationships. It's always been important and always will be important. But I think this is really a critical time right now. I think this is very timely, and that's why we're so passionate about it and excited about it.
Yeah, and what I would add, you know, I hope there's a lot of words that get used in education and in mental health that kind of become pop culture terms and almost lose some of their value. I hope that doesn't happen with the term intentionality. I feel like it's getting used a lot, but I really, really believe in that. And what I would recommend, along with your intentionality around this, I would really highly recommend creating some resilience leadership teams, as well as some relationship like positive relationship teams, that leadership teams that can help drive these initiatives. When I talk to people sometimes about trying to like create and promote systems change, I'll use the example of like a space shuttle. If you've ever watched a space shuttle take off from the ground, it's not a quick process. It takes a lot of moving parts, a lot of support staff, and it kind of hovers above the ground before it finally takes off. And then as that energy builds, it eventually takes off and it can kind of drive itself. But this happens in education all the time. All of us have access to a lot of material, a lot of programs, and we all have more stuff to do during the day than we have time to do it. And so if we don't have, a good leadership team that can drive these initiatives, including relationship focused initiatives, surrendering the one up initiatives, and resilience initiatives, these things won't drive themselves. We'll fill our time with something else. And so, we believe in the value of it. Well, let's go make it happen now and really drive this. And I would highly recommend starting conversations, starting dialogues, and making this part of your PLCs, that intentionality piece on the relationships. And then we're very happy to help. This is who we are organizationally. This is what we teach and train in on a regular basis. I feel like it's, definitely one of our biggest strengths. And the cool thing about this is, from a change, like a culture change standpoint, if you're part of an organization that you feel like culturally you really could make some improvement, when I've seen schools that commit to this concept and this model, I've seen culture change happen at a much deeper and a much more quicker rate than just about any other thing, because we know how hard that is. And this really helps, because the transformation that I think happens is all of us that participate in this, because it is so focused on doing it authentically. Like for me, when I focus on it, and I'm guessing Bruce and Corey would agree, like I myself have a perspective change. I start to see my students differently, and I even start to see my colleagues differently. And this overlaps into every aspect of life: personal relationships, work relationships, relationships with the parents of the kiddos that we're working with. It has really, really deep and broad implications. A couple things to respond to questions that have come up. People have asked about capturing this information. So we recorded this. We record all of our webinars. They're all available on our website, whytry.org, and then go to the webinars link. If you want to review any of this, or if you want to share this with like some of your administrators and start a conversation there, that's a great place to do it. Share that link. Some of you have asked about slides. We don't have the slides prepared to share with you, but I think we do have some material that we could share. We're going to send a follow-up out, but if you reach out on that QR code, set up a demo. We have program directors that are prepared to share any content that they can with you. And I think we can probably put together some information slides that they could share with you as well, that would hopefully be helpful for you to share with your teams, your staff, and your administrators. And my hope, I feel like I'm talking a lot here, but I'm so passionate about this. My hope is that all of you will start these conversations or continue these conversations where you're at locally in a really meaningful way, because this is what's going to make the difference. And as we start next year, our kids have to feel loved, seen, validated, and appreciated when they're in our presence, when they're in our schools. They have to feel safe, all of those things. And we know this is a way to do it. Great job, panelists. Bruce, Corey, any parting thoughts before we close this out?
No.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Well, huge thank you to our attendees today. We really value this community. These are so fun. I love the exchanges that happen in the chat. And I would love for you, if any of you have stories of things you've done that you think fall within that framework of surrendering the one up, please share them with us. We would love to hear them. We would love to hear about the ideas that you're doing. I think this is one of the most powerful things that we can collaborate on. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude it and just say a big thank you to all of our attendees. Hope you're gearing up for a great upcoming school year. I'm going to play us out with a little music. And thanks again for attending, everybody. You really are fantastic. Marie